The moment the judge read the verdict, and my husband's lover, the young woman who was wearing my mother's pearls, as if they were her own, had all the color drained from her pretty, treacherous face. That was the moment I knew I had not just won. I had triumphed. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Eleanor. My name is Eleanor Ainsworth. I am 83 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my home in the beautiful and deeply complicated city of Charleston, South Carolina. This story, my goodness, this is the story I have held in my heart, like a secret, poisoned jewel for 3 long years. It is a story I have never told a soul. Not my dearest friends at the garden club, not my own sister, not even my own children in its entirety. How do you find the words? How do you explain to the world that the man you built a life with, the man you slept beside for 52 years, the man you thought was the very definition of honor, was a thief, and that he did not just steal your money? He stole your memories, your history, and he gave them to another woman. There is a particular kind of shame that comes with a betrayal of that magnitude. It is a quiet, creeping, suffocating shame. It makes you question every memory, every shared laugh, every loving glance. You begin to believe that you are the fool, that you were blind, that you were a silly, sentimental old woman who was so easily deceived. And for a very long time, I wrapped that shame around me like a winter shawl, and I shivered in the cold of it. But I am 83 years old now, and I have decided that I am done being cold. I am done with the shame. I am telling my story now because I have learned that the only antidote to a lie is the truth, spoken out loud, in a clear and steady voice. And I am telling it for any woman or any man who has ever discovered that the person they trusted the most was a stranger living under their own roof. Before I begin this difficult, and I must confess, rather triumphant story, I would be so very grateful for your support. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your kindness, your presence here, it feels like a warm hand on a cold shoulder. It gives this old woman the strength to finally open the courthouse door of her memory and present the full, unvarnished, and damning evidence. Thank you, my dears. Thank you from the bottom of my southern heart. My life, for 52 blissful years, was a partnership with my husband, my dear Edward. He was a lawyer, a man of great integrity and quiet strength, one of the last true Charleston gentlemen. He believed in 3 things, above all else: family, honor, and the sacred duty of a man to provide for and protect the women in his life. Our life was not one of flashy, ostentatious wealth. It was a life of quiet, solid, old money, built on generations of wise investments and prudent management. It was a life of comfort, of security, of understated elegance. Our world was this house, the house my great-grandfather had built. It was a world of worn, priceless rugs, of portraits of stern-looking ancestors, of the scent of lemon oil and old books. It was a world of stability, and at the center of that stable, loving world was our daughter, our Elizabeth. Oh, my Lizzie. She was born with a heart full of sunshine and a soul full of art. She was not like her father and me. We were pragmatists. We understood the world in all its beauty and all its ugliness. Lizzie, my Lizzie, only ever saw the beauty. She is a painter. Her world is one of color and light, and the goodness she assumes resides in every human heart. She trusts. That is her greatest gift and her most profound, most dangerous weakness. She gives her trust completely, as a gift, assuming it will be honored, cherished, and protected. Her father and I, we did our best to protect her. We built a fortress of love and security around her. We educated her, we traveled with her, we nurtured her talent. And Edward, in his infinite wisdom, ensured that her financial future was as secure as her childhood had been. He set up a trust for her, an ironclad, untouchable inheritance that would ensure she would never have to depend on any man, that she would always have the freedom to pursue her art. After Edward passed away 10 years ago, Lizzie was my rock. We became a team of 2, a quiet pair of women living a quiet life in a big old house. And then, one spring evening, she brought him home. And the quiet ended. His name was Richard. And he was, I must admit, the most charming man I had ever met in my life, second only to my own Edward. He was a rising star in the world of finance, a portfolio manager for a prestigious firm. He was handsome, he was brilliant, he was ambitious, and from the moment he walked through my door, he seemed to understand, with an almost preternatural intuition, the precise language of our world. He didn't talk about money. He talked about history. He didn't admire our furniture. He admired the craftsmanship, asking about the artisans who had made it. He looked at the portrait of my great-grandfather, and he didn't ask what it was worth. He said, "He has your eyes, Lillian." That same look of fierce intelligence. He did not flatter me. He did something far more effective. He saw me. He listened to my stories of old Charleston, of my life with Edward, with a rapt, focused attention that made me feel, for the first time since my husband had died, truly interesting. And the way he looked at my daughter, oh my goodness. He looked at her like she was a masterpiece. He didn't just listen to her talk about her art. He asked intelligent, insightful questions. He went to her little gallery shows. He bought one of her paintings, a beautiful, abstract watercolor of the marsh at sunset, and he hung it in his own apartment. He treated her not as a pretty, gentle thing, but as a serious artist, a woman of substance. He was perfect. He was a gentleman of the old school, wrapped in the sharp, successful package of the new. He won me over completely. I thought, with a deep and profound sense of relief, that my daughter, my gentle, trusting Lizzie, had finally found a man who was worthy of her. A man who could be her partner, her champion, her protector. A man my Edward would have been proud of. When he asked for her hand in marriage, on bended knee, in the center of my garden, with a simple, elegant diamond that he said reminded him of her clear and brilliant soul, I wept with joy. I believed my daughter's future, the future Edward and I had so carefully built for her, was finally completely safe. I had no way of knowing that the fox had not just been invited into the henhouse. He had been handed the key, the deed, and the full run of the place, with the heartfelt blessing of the hens themselves. Their wedding was a thing of beauty, a perfect Charleston affair held in my garden under the shade of the ancient live oak trees. Richard was the model of a devoted, adoring groom. He looked at my Lizzie as if she were the only woman in the world. And in those first few years, he built a life for her that was, on the surface, idyllic. He was a brilliant financial manager, and he took my daughter's considerable trust fund, the one my Edward had so carefully established, and he made it grow. He was a master of the market. He bought a beautiful home for them, not far from mine, a classic Charleston single house with a walled garden, and a drawing room he filled with the art my Lizzie so loved. He encouraged her painting. He built her a magnificent studio overlooking the garden. He was, by all appearances, the perfect husband, the perfect son-in-law, and the perfect steward of our family's legacy. He was so clever. He understood that my daughter, my Lizzie, had no interest in the details of finance. She trusted him completely, implicitly. He would have her sign documents, and she would do so with a happy, trusting smile, never reading the fine print. "Richard handles all of that, Mother," she would say to me with a little laugh. "It's all just numbers and gibberish to me. I'm so lucky to have him." And I was lucky too. He included me in their life. I had dinner with them 3 times a week. He would call me just to check in. He would ask my advice on the garden, on social matters. He made me feel cherished, respected, and most importantly, still relevant. He was weaving himself so deeply into the fabric of our lives, of my life, that it became impossible to see where our family ended and he began. He was not an outsider. He was the new patriarch, the strong, capable man who had stepped so seamlessly into my Edward's shoes. And then there was Olivia. Olivia was my daughter's best friend. They had been inseparable since their first day of college. She was the yin to my Lizzie's yang. Where Lizzie was quiet and introspective, Olivia was loud and funny and gloriously, unapologetically alive. She was a photographer, a wild, bohemian spirit who traveled the world on assignment. She would come back to Charleston between trips, a whirlwind of exotic stories and infectious laughter, and she would land at our house, her safe harbor. I adored her. I loved her like a second daughter. She had a sharp wit and a keen eye, and she saw the world with a clarity that my own dear daughter sometimes lacked. She was the sister Lizzie never had, her confidante, her protector. Their bond was a beautiful, powerful thing to witness. When Lizzie married Richard, Olivia became a part of their circle. The three of them were a stunning, charismatic trio. They would host dinner parties that were the talk of the town. Richard the brilliant financier, Lizzie the beautiful artist, and Olivia the wild, fascinating photographer. They seemed to shine. I remember watching them at a party in my own home. The three of them were standing together, laughing, and Richard had one arm around his wife, and the other draped casually, familiarly, on Olivia's shoulder. And I felt a small, almost imperceptible flicker of something, a tiny, discordant note in a perfect symphony. It was nothing. Just a moment. A trick of the light. I dismissed it immediately. It was a disloyal thought. Olivia loved my daughter. And Richard adored his wife. It was plain for all to see. The first subtle sign that something was amiss came not from Richard, but from Olivia. She had always been my daughter's fiercest champion. But after a few years of the marriage, I noticed a change in her. A new subtle edge in her humor when she spoke of Richard. "And how is the lord of the manor?" Olivia asked me one afternoon, as we were having tea in the garden. "Richard is wonderful, as always," I had answered. She gave a small, cynical little smile. "Of course he is," she said, looking down at her teacup. "He is a man who has never known a day of want in his life. It is easy to be wonderful when the world is your oyster." The comment was so out of character, so sharp, that it took me by surprise. "That's a strange thing to say," I said. She just shrugged, her smile fading. "He's just very good at what he does," she said, and left it at that. I began to watch them more closely after that. Not with suspicion, not yet, but with a new awareness. And I started to see things. I saw the way Richard's eyes would follow Olivia when she moved through a room. I saw the way their laughter, their jokes, had a private, shared language that seemed to exclude my daughter. I saw the way he would listen to Olivia's stories of her travels, of her adventures, with a rapt, hungry intensity that he no longer reserved for my Lizzie. My daughter, my sweet, trusting Lizzie, saw none of it. She saw only her beloved husband and her beloved best friend, sharing a beautiful, easy camaraderie. She was so proud of them both. The idea that anything could be amiss in her perfect world was simply unthinkable. And I, her mother, I told myself, I was being a foolish, jealous old woman. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that Richard was a good man, that Olivia was a good friend, and that my daughter was happy. And that was all that mattered. The first real crack in the foundation, the first event that made me realize that my unease was not just the imaginings of an old woman, happened on my 78th birthday. Richard and Lizzie hosted a beautiful party for me at their home. Olivia, who was back from a trip to Morocco, was there, of course. It was a perfect evening. At the end of the night, as the guests were leaving, Richard presented me with his gift. It was a beautiful, first edition copy of a book of poetry that my Edward had loved, a book I had lost years ago. It was a thoughtful, perfect gift. As I unwrapped it, I saw Olivia standing behind him, and she was smiling, a small, secret, almost triumphant smile. And on her wrist, I saw a new bracelet, a delicate, beautiful, and very expensive-looking gold bracelet, one I had never seen before. Later that week, I was having lunch with Lizzie. I mentioned the bracelet. Olivia was wearing the most beautiful gold bracelet at the party, I said casually. Was it a gift from her new beau? Lizzie looked at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Bracelet? Oh no, Mother. A little trinket, from a market in Marrakech. I knew the name of the most exclusive jeweler in Charleston. I knew their work. And I knew with a sudden, sickening certainty that the bracelet on Olivia's wrist was not a trinket. It was a new piece from their latest collection, a piece that cost more than a new car. And I knew, with that same terrible certainty, that my daughter's husband had bought it for her. The world tilted on its axis. The perfect, beautiful life he had built for my daughter was a facade, a lie. And the man I had trusted, the man I had welcomed into my heart and my home, was a traitor. And he was not just betraying my daughter. He was betraying her with her own best friend. The pain of it, the sheer, breathtaking scope of the treachery, was a poison so potent I thought it would stop my heart. But it didn't. In that moment of absolute, soul-shattering clarity, something else took over. A cold, quiet, and formidable rage. The rage of a mother whose child has been threatened. The game had changed. This was no longer just about a marriage. This was about my daughter's future. It was about the legacy my husband had left for her. And it was about the fortune that Richard now controlled, a fortune that he was now spending on another woman. I did not know what I was going to do. But I knew one thing. I would not let him destroy my daughter. I would not let him take what was hers. I would go to war. But it would be a quiet war. A secret war. A war he would never even know he was fighting. Until the moment he had lost everything. The week after my birthday party was the quietest, most agonizing week of my life. I felt as though I was living in a different reality from everyone around me. On the surface, everything was perfect. My daughter was happy. Her husband was charming and attentive. Her best friend was a frequent, welcome guest in their home. But I now saw the truth that lay beneath that perfect, shimmering surface. I saw the rot, and the knowledge of it was a constant, bitter taste in my mouth. My first instinct was to confront them, to march into their beautiful home, to throw the evidence of the bracelet in their faces, to expose the lie. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it would be a catastrophic mistake. Who would my daughter believe? Me, her aging, sentimental mother, making a wild, jealous accusation? Or her brilliant, adoring husband, and her dearest friend, who would of course deny everything? They would paint me as a confused, meddling old woman. They would say I was imagining things. They would turn my righteous anger into a symptom of my decline. They would use my love for my daughter as a weapon against me, and they would break her heart in the process. No, I own. A direct assault was a fool's game. If I was going to protect my daughter, I could not just be a mother. I had to be a general. And a good general never reveals her strategy to the enemy. My war began not with a shout, but with a quiet, discreet phone call. I did not call my family lawyer. His firm also handled some of Richard's business, and the lines were too blurry. I needed someone with no connections to our family, someone with absolute discretion and a spine of pure, unforgiving steel. I called a friend from an old Charleston family, a woman who had been through a notoriously difficult divorce years ago. I asked her for the name of her lawyer. Her name was Eleanor Davenport, and she was not a gentlewoman. She was a shark, the most feared divorce litigator in the city. I sat in her cold, modern office, and I told her everything. I told her about my daughter's trust fund, the one my Edward had so carefully built. I told her about the power of attorney my daughter had so trustingly signed over to her husband. And I told her about the bracelet. Miss Davenport listened, her face a perfect, unreadable mask. She did not offer sympathy. She offered strategy. An affair is a difficult thing to prove, Mrs. Ainsworth, she said, her voice crisp and professional. Especially with a man as clever as your son-in-law. He will have covered his tracks. A bracelet is not enough. To protect your daughter, to ensure she gets what is rightfully hers in a divorce, we do not need a smoking gun. We need an arsenal. We need a detailed, documented, and undeniable accounting of his financial treachery. The affair will be the reason for the divorce. But the money will be our weapon. Her words were cold, but they were a comfort. She was not seeing me as a sentimental old woman. She was seeing me as a client, a partner. He controls all of her accounts, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of my own foolishness. We have no way of knowing what he's been doing. A small, thin, dangerous smile touched Miss Davenport's lips. Mrs. Ainsworth, she said, in my experience, a man who is cheating on his wife is almost always cheating on his partners. And a man who is cheating with his wife's money, he always leaves a trail. We just need to find it. That day, I hired Miss Davenport Doy. And on her recommendation, I also hired a man named Mr. Peterson, a forensic accountant. He was a quiet, unassuming man who looked more like a librarian than a financial detective, but Miss Davenport assured me he was a bloodhound. My instructions to them were simple, and they were absolute. I wanted to know everything. Every stock purchase, every wire transfer, every hidden account, every secret credit card. I wanted a complete financial autopsy of my son-in-law's life, and I told them that my daughter was to know nothing of this. This was a war I would wage on her behalf, from the shadows. The months that followed were an exercise in excruciating, quiet patience. On the surface, I was the same loving, slightly dotty mother and mother-in-law ... I went to their home for dinner. I played with my grandchild when he was born. I listened to Richard's charming stories, and I smiled at Olivia's witty jokes. I played my part so perfectly that even I sometimes forgot I was acting. Every time I saw him touch my daughter's hand, every time I heard him call her my love, I felt a hot, sickening rage rise in my throat, and I would have to swallow it down with a sip of my iced tea and a polite smile. I was living a double life. I was a spy in the house of my own family, and all the while Mr. Peterson, my quiet bloodhound, was digging. Every 2 weeks, a discreet, plain manila envelope would arrive at my door. Inside were his reports. And with each report, the picture of my son-in-law's treachery became clearer and more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. The first reports were small things. A secret credit card, used for expensive dinners at restaurants my daughter had never been to, for hotel rooms in the city. Then came the larger discoveries. A down payment on a luxury apartment in a new downtown development, an apartment that was not in his name, but in the name of a shell corporation. A corporation whose sole director, Mr. Peterson discovered, was Olivia. He had bought a love nest for my daughter's best friend, using my daughter's own money. The scale of his financial betrayal was staggering. He had been using my daughter's trust fund as his own personal piggy bank. He had leveraged her assets to take out massive, high-risk loans for his own speculative ventures. He had invested her money in a series of failing tech startups owned by his friends. He hadn't just made her money grow, he had made it vanish. He had been slowly, systematically draining her inheritance, siphoning off her future to fund his secret life and his reckless gambles. The final report from Mr. Peterson was the one that sealed his fate. It was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of a wire transfer. A transfer of $250,000 from my daughter's trust account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. An account that was in Olivia's name. The transfer had been made on the day of my 78th birthday. It was the money he had used to buy her the bracelet. He had not just given his mistress a trinket. He had given her $250,000 of my daughter's money as a birthday gift to me. The audacity, the sheer breathtaking arrogance of it, left me speechless. I sat in my quiet drawing room, the pile of reports on the table in front of me. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a mountain of financial ruin and personal betrayal. I had my arsenal. Now, it was time to plan the battle. I knew that simply confronting him with this evidence would be a disaster. He would deny it. He would create new lies. He would paint me as a meddling, vindictive old woman. He would destroy my daughter's heart and drag her through a long, ugly, and very public divorce. No, tight. The end of this war could not be a messy public spectacle. It had to be a quiet, clean, and brutally efficient execution. He had built his entire world on a foundation of lies and my daughter's money. I was not going to just expose him. I was going to let him watch, in a quiet room, as I legally, methodically, and completely took it all away from him. I laid the entire sordid history of my son-in-law's betrayal on Miss Davenport's polished mahogany table. The secret credit cards, the wire transfers, the love nest held in a shell corporation, and the final brutal insult of the $250,000 birthday bracelet. It was a mountain of evidence, a detailed, undeniable map of his greed. Miss Davenport reviewed every page, her expression never changing. She was a surgeon examining a diseased organ. When she was finished, she closed the portfolio, folded her hands, and looked at me. "He is a fool," she said, her voice a quiet clinical statement of fact. "A charming, arrogant, and breathtakingly stupid fool. He has leveraged your daughter's assets to a degree that is not just immoral. It is criminally negligent. He has left a paper trail a blind man could follow." "So what happens now?" I asked, my own voice steady. "Now," Miss Davenport said, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that looked like admiration in her sharp eyes. "We do not go to war. War is messy, and loud, and unpredictable. No, do. We will conduct a quiet, corporate, and brutally efficient execution. We will not give him a battle to fight. We will simply present him with the terms of his unconditional surrender." Nyan. The plan she laid out was a thing of terrifying, beautiful simplicity. It was not about a messy, public divorce court battle. It was about a quiet meeting, in a private room, where the full weight of Richard's treachery would be brought down upon his head in a single crushing blow. Our weapon would not be the affair. The affair was a moral failing, difficult to prove and easy to deny. Our weapon would be the one thing a man like Richard understood: the cold, hard, and unforgiving language of money. "He has commingled their assets to a criminal degree," Miss Davenport explained. "He has used her trust fund, a premarital asset, as collateral for his own high-risk business loans. He has, in short, built his entire financial world on the foundation of her inheritance. We are not going to try and untangle it. We are going to reclaim it. We are going to reclaim it." The first step was quiet, and it was invisible. On Miss Davenport's advice, using my limited but still valid authority as a trustee on my daughter's original trust, we moved. We did not freeze the accounts. That would have alerted him. Instead, we placed a quiet legal lien on every single asset he controlled: their house, their cars, his own investment portfolio. It was a silent, legal tripwire that he would not see until he tried to move a single dollar. The second step was the preparation of the documents. Ms. Davenport and her team worked for a month. They created a portfolio that was the mirror image of the one my investigator had compiled. It was a detailed line-by-line accounting of every dollar he had stolen, every asset he had leveraged, every lie he had told. And at the end of it was a single, simple, and utterly devastating document: a divorce settlement agreement. It was not a negotiation. It was a decree. It stipulated that my daughter Elizabeth would receive 100% of all remaining marital asset: the house, the cars, the art, the furniture, his personal investment accounts, which had been funded by her money. Everything. He would be left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the mountain of personal and business debt he had accumulated. In exchange for his immediate and unquestioning signature, my daughter would agree not to pursue criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. It was a checkmate, a quiet, elegant, and absolutely final move. Now, all we had to do was choose the moment to deliver it. I knew it had to be a moment of his own creation, a moment of his own arrogance. The opportunity came as I knew it would, from him. He came to me one beautiful spring afternoon, as I was tending to my camellias. He had a beautiful, leather-bound folder in his hand, and a look of sincere, loving concern on his face. "Lillian, my love," he began, his voice a soft, gentle purr. "I have been thinking about the future, about your future, and I have had my lawyers draw up a new updated will and estate plan for you. A simpler one, One that puts everything into a single, managed trust, with myself and Clara as co-executors, of course. It simplifies things. It protects you. Merveilleux. I looked at him, at his handsome lying face, and I felt a wave of nausea so profound I thought I might be sick right there in my prize-winning camellia bed. He had stolen my daughter's fortune, and now he was coming for mine. This was his endgame. To consolidate his control, to ensure that when I was gone, he would be the sole, unquestioned master of our family's entire legacy. But I did not let him see the rage in my eyes. I smiled my most gentle, most grateful smile. "Oh, Richard," I said, my voice trembling with a carefully crafted elderly fragility. "You are so thoughtful. You think of everything. But all these legal papers, they confuse me so. Could you possibly explain it to Clara and me together? So that my sweet girl understands how well you are taking care of her mother." His face lit up with a triumphant, patronizing smile. He thought I was inviting him to perform, to showcase his brilliance and my dependency in front of my daughter. He had no idea I was summoning him to his own execution. "Of course, Adeline," he said, patting my hand. "That's a wonderful idea. Let's have a family meeting, tomorrow afternoon. We can all sit in the study and I will walk you both through it, step by step." The trap was set. The time and place were chosen. He had, in his supreme arrogance, just scheduled his own day of reckoning. That evening, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my daughter. I told her that Richard wanted to have a family meeting tomorrow to discuss some important financial matters, and that it was very important she be there. The second call was to Ms. Davenport. "He has taken the bait," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Tomorrow afternoon, in my study." "I will be there," she said, "and I will not be coming alone." The next day, I woke up with a strange and terrible sense of calm. Today was the day I would save my daughter. And today was the day I would destroy her husband. I did not know if my own heart could bear the cost of doing both. The meeting took place in my husband's study. Richard was seated behind Edward's grand mahogany desk, a position of power he had assumed as his own. He had a stack of documents in front of him. Lizzie was seated in a chair to the side, looking slightly nervous but proud of her husband. I was seated opposite Richard, a picture of frail, elegant calm. I have, in my 80 years, attended many meetings in this study. Meetings with my husband about business, about family, about life. But I had never attended a meeting quite like this. I was not there as a mother or a matriarch. I was there as a general, about to spring a trap that had been a year in the making. My heart was not beating fast. It was beating with a slow, cold, and steady rhythm. The rhythm of what must be done. Richard was in his element. He was performing. He was the brilliant, capable man of the house, patiently explaining the complex world of finance to the 2 simple women in his care. He had charts. He had graphs. He spoke of trusts and tax shelters and generational wealth transfer. He was so confident, so utterly convinced of his own narrative, that he didn't notice the quiet, profound stillness in the room. He didn't notice that I wasn't just listening, I was waiting. He walked my daughter through his new, simplified estate plan for me. A plan that would, of course, give him, as co-executor with a confused and frail primary beneficiary, complete and total control. "And so," he said, reaching the crescendo of his performance, "you can see, my darlings, that this is the safest, most prudent course of action. It protects the legacy. It protects all of us." He pushed the final signature page towards me with a flourish. "All we need now, Lillian, is your signature." I looked at the document. Then I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears of gratitude. "Oh, Richard," she whispered, "you are so good to us, to Mom." And then I looked at him. I held his gaze. And I spoke. "It is a very impressive plan, Richard," I said, my voice quiet, but clear as a bell. "But I'm afraid I will not be signing it." The smile on his face froze. He stared at me, a flicker of annoyance, of confusion in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "Lillian, I think you're just a little overwhelmed." "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I am not overwhelmed. And I am not confused. In fact, I have never been more clear in my entire life." I stood up, a movement that was slow, but steady and strong. "This meeting is not about my will, Richard. It is about yours." Just as I said those words, there was a quiet knock at the study door. Before Richard could speak, I said, "Come in." The door opened, and Miss Eleanor Davenport walked in. She was not alone. She was followed by two men, my quiet bloodhound, the forensic accountant, Mr. Peterson, and a senior partner from her law firm. They were all holding identical, thick, leather-bound portfolios. The color drained from Richard's face. He looked at Miss Davenport, then at the portfolios, then at me. And in my eyes, he did not see a frail, confused old woman. He saw his executioner. What is this?" he stammered, his voice a dry, cracking whisper. "This," Miss Davenport said, her voice like ice, "is a full and complete accounting of your financial activities for the past 5 years." She placed her portfolio on the polished desk with a soft, heavy thud. "It details, line by line, every dollar you have embezzled from your wife's trust fund. It documents every high-risk, personal loan you have secured using her premarital assets as collateral. It contains the deeds to the downtown apartment you purchased for your mistress and the statements from the offshore account you opened in her name." "Kya?" She paused, letting the weight of the words settle into the dead, silent room. My daughter, Lizzie, just stared, her face a mask of pale, uncomprehending shock. "And this," Miss Davenport continued, gesturing to the second man, "is Mr. Peterson, the forensic accountant who compiled this evidence. He is prepared to testify, under oath, to every single transaction." She then turned her cold, merciless gaze upon Richard. "In short, Mr. Ainsworth, we have enough evidence of felony fraud and embezzlement to ensure you spend a very, very long time in a federal prison." Richard just sat there, his handsome face slack with shock. He was a man who had just been struck by lightning. He tried to speak, but only a small, choking sound came out. And then I made my final move. "However," I said, my voice calm and quiet, "we are not going to do that. A criminal trial would be a public spectacle, and I will not have my daughter's name, or my family's name, dragged through the mud of your sordid little affairs." I pushed a single, thin envelope across the desk towards him. "That," I said, "is a divorce settlement agreement. It is not a negotiation. It is a decree. You will sign it. Now." He opened it with a trembling hand. He read the single page. I watched as the last vestiges of hope died in his eyes. I watched as he finally, completely, understood the totality of his ruin. The agreement was simple. He would walk away with nothing. Less than nothing. He would get the clothes on his back, his personal effects, and the mountain of business and personal debt that was now solely in his name, as every marital asset had been legally and meticulously traced back to my daughter's original trust. The house, the cars, the remaining funds, the art. It was all hers, untouchably hers. In exchange, my daughter would agree not to pursue criminal charges. He looked up at me, his eyes now filled with a pathetic, begging despair. "Lillian, please." "There is nothing left to say, Richard," I said. I placed a beautiful, antique fountain pen on the desk in front of him. "Sign it." My daughter, my poor Lizzie, finally found her voice. She had been sitting in stunned silence, her world crumbling around her. She just looked at her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted, and she whispered a single word. "Why?" He couldn't even look at her. He took the pen, and with a hand that shook so violently he could barely form the letters, he signed his name. He signed away his life. He left that afternoon. He packed a single bag and walked out of my daughter's life, a ghost of the charming, powerful man he had pretended to be. Olivia, my daughter's best friend, vanished as well. Her name was on too many of the documents. Her own complicity had ruined her. My daughter's heart was shattered. The betrayal was absolute. But my Lizzie, she has her father's strength deep within her. The healing has been a long, slow, and painful process. But she is painting again. And her colors, I have noticed, are stronger now. Bolder, but she is finding her own voice, her own power, in the ashes of her broken heart. We are a team again. A quieter, sadder, but infinitely wiser team. I learned that the most dangerous lies are not the ones that are shouted, but the ones that are whispered with a loving smile. I learned that a man's charm can be a mask for his weakness. And I learned that a mother's love is not a soft, sentimental thing. A mother's love is a fortress. And I, like my dear Edward, will do anything to protect the people inside it. Richard thought he was playing a game for money. He never understood that I was playing a game for my daughter's life. He saw a gentle, aging woman. He did not see the queen on the board, quietly moving her pieces, protecting her own, and waiting, with infinite patience, for the perfect moment to say, "Checkmate." So if you are out there, and you are fighting a quiet battle for someone you love, do not lose hope. Do not believe the narrative of your own weakness. Be patient. Be clever. And remember this, old woman. Remember that sometimes the most powerful move is the one your opponent never, ever sees coming. Thank you for letting me share this very painful and very private chapter of my life with you. It is a solemn reminder to always read the fine print, especially when it comes to the heart. If you have found strength in this story, please do take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell for more stories. And in the comments below, please feel free to share a story at a time when a mother's quiet strength saved the day. Love you all. This is Grandma Lillian, and I'll see you in the next story.